Tene tatanda tambo tashidele. Shujita tene te jisla tanda tambo narange kasen chodorg ong jincherg longje denge yangla. Tene te chidambege. Tene long ta jita tato. Kulong number tapi senaroche.
First of all, good morning. And then I will now give you the reading transmission, as several of you have requested, for the daily practice associated with the Vajrapani empowerment that I gave yesterday. While receiving the transmission, please do so with a pure motivation.
Dewa dang dewi jodong dembra jurje dungal dong dong aje jodong trawa jurje dungal mebe dewa dang ba dong man trawa jurje nyeren chodong ni dong tra tu nyong chimbola ne para jurje chodoro tumbu je jona benzara amra daya sang jang soba we jong chu tam je me ba tomba ni jeng ne ki je ge doji sak Ragur mera donji be sungur je uza be nye den doruni chom den de doje dombo gun don den ma ga je chani ba ye be doje zenga nam ga la charwe tin zo za ye den nam jambar je ba ye tu gar tin zo de o zo lo ye den nam jambar je ba khal don ge je wa nam bar je marla dum be je sam dom mi do yo wa o ta do ma 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 je me dara ambara wa jin do se gen ta ba gom bo nge o je Ba lu ji du ji jin jan ta ku me ta ga ba be kan da jin rumbo ji jin to me te ba kha ye ku ye jong ne jin ta da ra da ne ba ba bu ga tom jin ne tu zo ba da me ban tro wa de ye tro wa om dun para a tu gra hong bo de le we zeren tu gom ba dong da we ge ba jin tro ben zara saman za za hong bo wo ni zo me ba jro la ra yong tu ge hong le we zeren tu Ringang kuru je jen zhong argam su jen je om sarvata thangada bege gade samaya Shiriye wong ye sarvata be ringang kuru je 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 bumba dune om sarvata thangada bege gade samaya shiriye wong ye sange om kuru ve chu jin je ko kong tamata chu ya lama jen don chirwa le me jebe O jen bara chorra tiye tukra nime chinguru je ten da hong ting no ga ta maran ten ne zon te ye kuru Ombeza zendra maharoga no hong pe hi pe yin do bendro ya Shamatha bon kurwa te da le we zrin tu lu tam je chap ne den de de tam je sal ne ji je du zo tam je he ne ku hin de ba dong rong ni tu da ra do je yin de ten ne ta dang do ba Ombeza zendra maharoga no hong pe da ni tu ge hong den de ni jong me me dong ben hong de nyom briga Gewande yinyu doda yidang la zong rujun nendruwa ji jong ma lupa tiye salang paray sho. Hati ge chadur tumbu ge long te chupayin la. Tene ta te jisla ngara zo bardu ge ti ge na ne ta chitang ge kasing ge kapsala ridu ge ne zo jewa lempe ge jonda boda tene ta te gendo je bardu ge tunong chatong da tene te jisla jewa lempe ge kapla ridu ge lamda ridu ge nonganda bo chatang ge kor hi ba je ta ta ti kapsala zo kan kal che ge se na ta jisu tempa to kasing homa hi ba gendo Sanjie la solvata, tene trambe chue la solvata, genden la solvata pati, kenchu som jis trembata, tene ngarangi chagin la sopa pombe ke cheto tonga jis trembata, tene yidam jala jis trembata, tene tingenze jis trembate, sushim jis trembate, tenam yang ni yang do gomni. Gom na ti jis teni solwa tap na chunhong namba na tsoba khere kapsalaya chunhong tenzo hiwa teni te kendo riduke niela jewe ka lam tenzo hiwa kapsalaya te tabo solwa tap na teni chitanga tanda tsindige nuanda boje tene pacha tupo maimba yijilu imbi cherna tene jay depata mugu taine rang semte yaboji jor topna chunhong rakpa tenzu hiri yaba jay ta tene tejendo jay chayin chimbuge tene jewa lendap shene yana nyensong nes jewa lendap sheba la soba ta deta buji changna ya tenhi tong paye ge go ne kenchu soma tap sun do la soba sonde ta tene mikpa la soba yaboji changna tene tinwa de njor lawa tene te imbe cherna ta deta bu riduk ne kitang riduk ne se je ma yorwa riduk ne mixal to ngen song ne se je ma yorwa te tene rang te hi tene kapka la nyarwa la soba la je ka sun jito ko ke drbe no ta je de tene je ge yo pata yang kapka la tene chahin ge on ge je ge yo bala soba yin de cherna ta ti chahin to pata jito to bu ge cheto so wa ta pata tene rang sem de nal ne pata tene yang kapka la ngara bardo la ye pa hi kapkala pardola ya pa jin ro ta bota tinde im pichna te ya temba tan hi yin tembo che rain chi mi chi che jute kal che bo yin sa la tene rang ke chewa lembe kapsala ya ta rap tu chona kasin kon tu pa yin to dewa chin tu ji ju ya la tene ta bi hin kan ro ta bi hin kan thang chi ge na ne che lawa ta pe chewa de dewa chin ji hin kan yin pichna dewa chin tu ji ge tap 다 단다 첸달라 있나요? 솔. 드니 디캅슬라 있나요? 드니 나랑게 대화지는 미바데. 드니 조 밤에라 솔와다. 다 딘데 신네. 세주가 고르데 기바레.
So that was the reading transmission for the practice of the form of Vajrapani called the Vajrachanda. And now we'll continue with the explanation of the Bardo. Yesterday we saw how the light paths to the 6 states appear, and how the appearances of birth, associated with birth in the various realms, arise as well. At that time, it's important to employ these 6 recollections. That is to say, the supplication of or prayer to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the recollection of your acts of generosity in order to reverse attachment, the recollection of your yidam, and the recollection of moral discipline. Through recollecting these things, the appearances will be pacified. The reason for this is that in the Bardo, your body is a mental body. Therefore, when your state of mind changes, the appearances change as well. In particular, if in the interval of becoming you find yourself driven toward or attracted to rebirth in a lower state, then forcefully pray to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and make aspirations for a good rebirth. And by doing so, you will be able to prevent the unfortunate birth through changing the appearances and changing your state of mind. In general, in the interval of becoming, we want to avoid, if possible, a rebirth in any of the 6 states. But if that is not possible, at least we must avoid rebirth in the lower states. For example, a rebirth in the hell realm can occur in one of several ways. Sometimes you actually flee something else that terrifies you, and fleeing that, you feel driven into a hell realm. At other times, you initially perceive the hell realm as somehow attractive or desirable, and are born in it through attachment. Therefore, it's important in this phase of the interval to ensure that you are not under the power of either intense fear or intense attachment, either of which can cause an unfortunate rebirth. So at all times, it's important to keep your mind stable and, as much as possible, at rest. Now, the importance of mindfulness and alertness here cannot be overemphasized, because although in general you know at this point that you have died and that you're in the interval, that knowledge is not continuous. Sometimes you remember that this is the interval and that you're dead, but at other times you forget it. And in order to not be swept into an unfortunate birth at a time when you forget where you are to begin with, it's important to maintain mindfulness and alertness. At this point in the interval, you are attempting to choose a birth. The best birth possible is birth in a pure realm. Of all pure realms, the easiest to be born in and the most beneficial to be born in is Sukhavati, the realm of Amitabha. So in order to ensure that you can achieve rebirth in Sukhavati in the Bardo, during this life, you should carefully and assiduously amass the 4 causes of that rebirth, which I explained yesterday. Especially, constantly bring the realm to mind and pray to the Buddha Amitabha.
Tene ta te tabo jaitan. Tene ta te tabo devajin to jeo matupanda bota. Tene ta te devajin to jewa le tangaranzo milu topala gawanda. Tene ina tene ta tela ya jerdo tene jego madape jego gabata. Tene ta number top jego ndamba. Number 2 ore la. Tene te nane madape jego gaba te la ta jerdo ngenson na machi pa jego gaba. Tene te jendo milu ina ya milu ngemba ta milu tapja tene la machi we tapse pa. Ta tene la tene te ya je jego ngemba la je kapsula kapkala pardun jirago jira je ne omi to tene take son da bota omi to trundu go da bota ta tene ke no char chona tene ti kapsula lama kenchola solwata tene lama kenchola randa te tene se go re son re la tene te yang ni yang do ta tanda jene patola ngaranza tanda mesendala te pe kapsula ina ya ti sinji to je kapta tene nyen ha chung kapla so pa tindela ti kaju ina ya lama kencho la so wata tene sanje tang chanchu samba tang je la so wata tinde she na tene te kaju ina yo kam so imbe wanke tene padu gun no cha yin ji to la so pa je kapsula rang yin ji kencho sam je su tempa ta tene rang tsa lama jesu tempa ta tene ta rang yiram jala jesu tempa te rang yin ki yon yin be cherna tene chitang ke ngesong ke jego chepa la ya de ke pemba che ta ngesong ke jego main na ya tene ta tanda me jewa la ya te tanjur don dembe milu cha changwa main ba te memba nda ko ta tende la machi we cheto tene ta tetabu yoni yondo lama kencho la solwata tene kencho son jesu ten solwata tene sen nardo pa chunhong ki jesu mandong waje ta chunhong la kapka la chunhong yapo jipu ki nong hyane tela choyin ki ong ki jupa tene kapka la tanda yang jita chunhong dupo tende ga onge no harwa ta tende nika kare chauna ya tende ti ji su mandong wa sen naldo ne ngaran pardo la yeba te ngohi ba pardo la yeba te ngohi ne ngaran jewa lenge yeba jewa ngemba le mini ba tende ngal go go ba tundo ta pe na jewa ngemba le mini ba ta le mini ba ta tende jewa zambo le go ba jewa zambo ndamba la ya tende ngaran ke sen naldo phamni tende jewa zambo ndamba gogi ware la tene te yang zo ta milu topni milu je jewa lembe kapso tene pama nin tong ne ta te la chakpatan shenpan rabochi ji ne te onki chodong go ni yugi yo song la tini te sen dala ina ya tini rapt shama damba number tapa lemba ta te si jiwa chimpa pome ka kagre te ina yung depi lopre yemba pombe ge ta kasin konti kipa yendo genyi ji damba yang taba ji len top na tini te ge jen ji tu jondo sen la ten he tong pa ye je demba yembe cher na tini te tabu ngal gungen bala je kapsula ya je chayin rabo je mejewa tikap tenala tenhi pai laptop je ranghi je kambe pacha sambo je yeba yembe cherna jitang ke sendala je depi lopari yemba pompe damba je ta genyi je damba ta je lenje te be kalchembo yemba je ta genyi je damba lemba te ya tu jondo ngarange yapo je songugre tini sombege tenhi pai te yapo je yona tini tepe kalchembo re.
If, for whatever reason, you are unable to achieve rebirth in Sukhavati, or you particularly wish to be reborn as a human being in fortunate circumstances, then the next thing you need to do is twofold. The first is called closing the doors or gates to an undesirable rebirth, and the second is consciously choosing a desirable or appropriate rebirth. Undesirable rebirths include rebirth in any of the lower states, as well as a human birth under unfortunate circumstances. Now, at this point in the interval, you may become driven by fear. In other words, the bewildered appearances that you experience being terrifying may impel you to take the first birth that comes. You have to therefore resist this tendency to panic and to take the first birth that appears rather than consciously choose it. So when in the interval you are driven by or tormented by fear, you should pray to your guru and the three jewels and ask for their help or assistance. In order to be able to do that, as with the other practices in the interval, you must establish the momentum and habit of doing so in this life. In order to do that, whenever during this life you experience fear or you perceive danger, immediately pray to the Guru and the three jewels, pray to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And by establishing the habit of that response to fear and or danger, that habit will last and will re-arise as a response to fear in the interval. You'll be able to recollect the three jewels, recollect the Guru, the Yidam, in the interval, and thereby you'll be able to prevent unfortunate rebirth. So in that way, you can prevent rebirth in lower states, and also you can prevent an inappropriate or unfortunate human birth as well. So throughout the interval of becoming, one of the principal practices is to continually recollect the Guru and the three jewels, to pray to them, and to rest your mind so that it not enter a state of panic. However, there are actually two types of bewildered appearances which are experienced during the interval of becoming, and they pose two different problems. One type of bewildered appearance is the fearsome, terrifying, threatening kind, which inspires fear, and the fear is dealt with as has been just explained. The other type is pleasant, desirable, bewildered appearances, and these generate attachment rather than fear. This craving and attachment can also cause an unfortunate birth. So you also have to have a way of not being overpowered by that. In short, at this point in the interval, you must ensure that you are not overpowered by either pleasant, bewildered appearances, which cause craving and attachment, or unpleasant ones, which cause fear. To do this, fundamentally you need to maintain the recollection that you are in the Bardo, and the strong motivation, I must not take an inferior birth, I must consciously choose a good or appropriate birth. Now, with regard to taking birth as a human being, usually beings who are about to be conceived and born human see their parents, the parents they're about to acquire, in sexual union. At that point, the being will tend to generate attachment or desire for one parent and aversion or jealousy for the other. Now, it is the combination of these two emotions, desire and aversion or resentment, that actually propels you into the womb, propels you into the birth. So if that particular human birth is not one that you want to take, you need to find some way of stopping or shutting down those two emotional states. One very powerful tool to enable you to do this is the moral discipline that you have maintained in the preceding life, in particular, given the circumstances, moral discipline connected with sexuality. If you were a monastic in the preceding life, the habit of the maintenance of monastic discipline will be a strong force enabling you to shut down the emotions of desire and resentment that arise. But even if you're not a monastic, if you have received the upasaka vow, and among the upasaka vows in particular, the vow to abstain from adultery, this is a tremendous help as well. Because the momentum of mindfulness that's established when you take such a vow, that throughout your life is maintained as the thought, I must not commit adultery, will, like other such momentums, arise in the interval. At that point, the arising of this habit of moral discipline connected with sexuality can be used to stop the mindless reaction of desire and resentment when seeing your prospective parents that will otherwise propel you powerlessly into the womb. And that is one of the reasons why taking this particular upasaka vow is so helpful and important, because of the momentum that it establishes.
Tene ta te ta bu je gu ga pa ta je gu ndam ba ta ngara je sem te hi ba ye ga go ne sem na do pa ni ken jo som so wa ta ne ni je wa sang bu je lem ba ma lam ta je de ta je wa len ju de be kal che ge la tene ta te tar do ji tang ge ta je par du ge te number ye Jene Bardo, Tene Cheke Bardo, Juni Bardo, Sepa Bardo de Namba Yeson Rela, Tene Tati Bardo Nguma de Tan Cheke Bardo Ta Jay, Tene Juni Bardo Ta Ni, Sepa Bardo Ton Somre, Jene Bardo de Ta Tandi Mesendal Rela, Tene Bardo Sumbo de Kap de Nala, Tene Cheke Bardo La Dungan Mepaje. Ni chuni parto London roaje la chuni parto London mando na sepa parto teon teni pe parchi ta jengi me pa ji rap de na ta pe hin hon ro to ba na de ta ba ma jon na yo milu chudin ji milu zang ma to ba je tap de ta kal che ge yo la ti tap de kal che wa de ta chitang ge ti kap tna la ya kal che ge yo re te yin na ya Ti kap tana la long hong ayong mayong de tanda tsen dige kong pa pacha la ra le pa yin bichar na tene Bardo sumbo tegi nane tela pento chewate tene tanda jehi Bardo ta mesendala tene kal chegi yore mesendala tene kal chegi yore la kal chewate ya pe ngaranzo kalwa zambo chong yore cherdo tanjurji Mahamudra Rinpoche matab na tene je tanda tambe je somba zambo zam ta tene je jitang jeba zambo zam seju ge kokap ndabo yue na mato ngune ge tambe ju cha sangwa je nyangsa lembe kokap meba je tene milu top na ya tambe ju je go la mayu na tene te ya te tar to ta je jitang dewar hi be nimbo ye be tab je khahe la somba zambo ta dembanda ko ta jelom zambo ta dembanda ko te le zambo ndabo so thu ge yore te yina ya nguni ge ne do nbe ge tene chue de nyamsle thu ge yo mare la junsin teacher na ngaranso tanda kalwa zambo je la milu tho ye ba je ta milu thopa te ya tanjur tsangma tene tambi chue dan temba tambi chue dan tepege milu tsangma de tobi yaba yinbe cherna tene ta ngaranzo tanda ndige kap tena la tene tanda sendala ya jengi tong parchi meba je ta tene jewa chima la ya lute ngemba mangompa je ta tandi ke kokap zangbo je tobi yore la kokap zangbo tobi kap tena la tene tuze thola matongwa je be kalchewa tene kasi tutup nyamni nanggu ge yoba je da tene ta te la ya tanda nyamni nanggu ge yoba je da tene ya kafkala te khahi ge na tene chha je chisare tene hiro thugu mare suanda bo yore de ina ya te tanda chendala tambi chula kulma nang ge chetula tene namare la tene ta te jitang ge tanda chendala ina ya tene ribatem chhala ina ya tene tenhi pa ye tene rangi me yin chiwege tru sepa taba je ina ya ta kasin kontu hibare la jitang ge nyemombo ondo mahiro je ta semti naldo paptaba je tene hisaini jang je karigugi yore se na jerdo tanda je tanda partu tudu la sopan denju ta degendo tambi chuji jawa se ta tene degendo je chogala sopa soma samu ge chogala sopa la tene ta tanda sen parupote jewa ngamba mampa je tende ge tap seju te ape kalcha bore la tene te khahi ge na hitsar ne choga tama te som peng mare se suayo yore te ina ya te ta je ti ge ta hitsar ne choga la soba tana de dogre sambe ge lelo la soba jewa ta tambi chu la zendu chong do la soba nyembo da bo ji suare ma to tene tanda tene te pento meba mare la tene te ta hene melam zambo jayan ra botan tene te yendo choga zambo tan yan ra botan tene te yendo himbo ti tent gewe zawa saya la so paten zo ya tene be pento chembore
In that way, you close the door or gate to an undesirable birth, which is stopping birth that you don't want to take or preventing it. The other thing you're doing at this point in the interval is choosing a birth. And principally you do this by consciously recollecting and repeatedly reinforcing your aspiration to take a certain type of rebirth. And the combination of preventing undesirable births and aspiring toward a certain type of birth will allow you to consciously choose the circumstances of your birth. As we've seen in this presentation, there are 4 intervals. The interval of this life, the interval between birth and death, the interval of the time of death, the interval of dharmata, and the interval of becoming. Of these 4, what we're usually referring to when we say the bardo, or the interval, is the 3 latter ones: the interval of the time of death, the interval of dharmata, and the interval of becoming. So, in that sense, when we talk about the intervals, it seems that what's important is those 3, and the interval of this life is not so important. However, what happens to us in those 3 intervals, dying and after death, really depends principally upon what we do in this life. What we want to achieve is an experience of the interval of the time of death that is without suffering, an experience of the interval of dharmata where there is recognition and awareness, and an experience of the interval of becoming where we can consciously choose our rebirth, either in a pure realm or an excellent human birth. But all of these things, the successful traversal of these 3 intervals, principally depend upon the habits that we create during this life, the interval between birth and death. So in that sense, the most important interval is the interval of this life. In particular, we are extremely fortunate in that our experience of this present interval between birth and death is the experience of a precious human existence. If someone is a human being but does not possess the freedom and resources that characterize a precious human existence, then the best they can do is cultivate a state of benevolence and good behavior. And that is quite possible. People who do not have a precious human existence can be benevolent, they can behave well, they can therefore accumulate good karma, because they too have Buddha nature. But what they cannot do, because they have no access to Dharma, is effectively prepare for the Bardo. Now we can prepare for this effectively because of the resources and freedom that we have, because we have access to Dharma. So therefore, our precious human life is not only a situation of resources that make this life more pleasant, but a situation of resources that we can use to ensure that all future lives are more pleasant as well. So use this time, this interval, and these resources as best you can, and practice as much as you can. Nevertheless, some commentaries on the intervals say things like that once you're dead or once you're dying, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. If you didn't practice assiduously in the preceding life, then it's too late. This is not actually true. This is said in order to encourage you, who, reading that, are presumably still within this life, to practice by recognizing the tremendous value and tremendous importance of it. It is not the case that what happens while you're dying and even after your death is unimportant. A great deal can be achieved. Therefore, at the time of your death, pay careful attention to the circumstances. Try to maintain, as much as possible, mindfulness and alertness. Surround yourself with caregivers or companions who are conducive to the proper and conscious traversal of the Bardo. And above all, try to rest your mind. Even though in texts that principally are encouraging practice in this life, it's said that nothing can be done for someone after their death, this is not true. There is a great deal that can be done for someone. After someone has died, the recitation of the Great Liberation through hearing in the Bardo, the performance of special rituals, purification ceremonies, and so on, all of these things can help the person tremendously. When commentaries say these things are not much use, it's too late, they're saying that because if they said these things are going to help tremendously, there's a danger that we would become lazy by thinking, well, I don't have to practice. All I have to do is make sure that after I die, people perform purification rituals, and that'll take care of it. So to reverse that potential problem, the texts say it's too late. They're not going to do any good. You've got to do it yourself now. So take those statements in context and understand that in your own case and in the case of those you know, the engagement by survivors of aspirations, in purification ceremonies, in the making of offerings and so on the deceased person's behalf, are all of tremendous benefit.
Tene tatige partuge te tuparela tene tanda tesumsina tuanda manjona ta kai hido limpuna.
So that is the instruction on the intervals. It's over. Now, if you would like to ask any questions, go ahead.
I have one teeny question and then one a little larger one. The teeny one is, if Rinpoche could mention what the mantra associated with the Vajrapani visualization practice is.
Tewa chungchung chik tang chimpo chik yoris. Tewa chungchung de palchadna doje tombo ge nga kare.
Te tanda chitang ke chon doji ge nyamle be mangbuyo mandawa mangbuyo reba. Tene kasing ke wang de tanda tene huma rejungpa malarepa loma rejungpa. Tene konga nasa dugo di chunga rela. Tene tige jenji kong jagala pe jagarne tene damwa ishu de rejung lobji chodur tumbo sengi ji yorela. Tige wang tang tige nyamle rela. Tene ta tere ngwala ombezar zendra maha roha na gongpe isiki ji yorela.
Well, there are a lot of different Vajrapani practices, many different forms of the deity, and therefore many different mantras. The empowerment that was given yesterday was for a form of Vajrapani that's called Vajrachanda, or the indestructible, ferocious one. And the Vajrachanda, this particular lineage of Vajrachanda practice comes from Rechungpa, the disciple of Milarepa, who at a certain point in his life became seriously ill and went to India in part in order to receive treatment and instruction that would alleviate his illness. While in India, he received this Vajrachanda empowerment and practice, and by practicing it, he cured himself of his illness. And this lineage has been passed down through time, and that's what was transmitted yesterday. The mantra for this particular form of the deity is Om Vajrachanda Maharokana Hom Pai, or Om Banzara Tsanda, if you want. However, you know. Om Vajra Tsanda, or Vajrachanda Maharokana Hom Pai. Deredwa. Tanzanga Yiki Kashi Shogada. Om Banzara Tsanda Maharokana Hom Pai. Detsamredwa. Yeah, I get confused because there's other mantras that are almost the same. Then what was your second
quick
question?
Is the Shitro practice. Would that fall into one of the three types of practices, aspirations, offerings, or the third one I can't recall already, that you were just talking about?
Oh,
I was
okay.
wondering when that could be used, if it would be used in the company of a dying or deceased person, and at what point?
That the shitru dakche de that the shenda shiwe kapsu de pejetanya yorepe konso ke pempele the gomna pengrebe yana konso mashi gomna nyam de gom
신의 겁나요 팽그래 와 근데 왜 저도든다고 된서 제 힘보 되게 장한다보다 되게 저도 겁나 팽그래.
Yes, yeah, it could be used. In that case, during the emanation and withdrawal of light rays, which is part of the visualization in connection with the mantra repetition, you would principally think that the light rays purify the either dying or deceased person of their wrongdoing and obscurations. And this would be a source of great benefit.
Well, that was one of my questions, so now I only have one now. You mentioned when the being is about to be born and what they're attracted to, and they see aversion in one parent and desire in another.
No, they have aversion for one and a desire for another. Yeah.
Right. Is that normal, or what is the best emotions that are they always going to have aversion to one and desire to another, or is there...
Do you mean, is that going to continue during the life, or what do you mean?
No, well, that, but also, will it always be like that? You will always have aversion to one and desire to another?
In the Bardo.
In the Bardo.
That the milu chebeke ngado mashu gong ke kapde the pama de zotone de ne chikla chakpa chikla dangwa yongre songs. De ngatso ke milu kadulena de do yongrebe.
다 le takpa 다보지나 되네 대답 많이 봐. 제와는 바다 le 못봐 대인은 양 지도한다고 그건 제왕님 발래봐. le 마도 긴 발체를 다대 자동 그거는 주바대 여행들이 성료래.
It depends upon the degree of the person, what kind of karma the person has. If someone has very good or very pure karma, then their motivation for taking that human rebirth will not be desire and resentment. If they have very bad karma, their motivation for taking that human rebirth will be fear rather than desire and resentment. But those who take human rebirth through sort of middling karma do so through that combination of emotions.
And also, we're used to being awake in this lifetime and then going to sleep at night, and we have a habit of awake and asleep. In the Bardo, is there an actual experience of feeling awake and then you're asleep? Or is it the same all through?
Tata ngatsu tse de la sepe nekap ta ni kokpe nekap ni yore. Takpa de ni ki remosu do nyamso nyong yore. De bakjak je Bardo la nepe kapso de zamzam sepe nekap ke chadawa dang zamzam ni kokpa chadawa de ge nyang yong grepe.
Te yong go jare.
Nope.
Takora padu. 마도 방아란솔레는 제만이야.
Ore. No, it seems that Bardo beings don't think about going to sleep. They don't have that kind of cycle. They don't have a sleep cycle.
Rinpoche, after hearing the description of the practices to achieve rebirth in Dzogchen, I can understand how some other forms of Buddhism, such as Pure Land, devote their entire system to such practices. How is it, given that it seems so important and not as difficult as many other practices that we've heard about, I guess my question is how is it that this is, you know, maybe only one small part of all the practices that we typically hear about.
That the Dzogchen the Chewa Lama ke Penyon dang le labo yemba dezo gotsane dene nangpe chulok pena janat dang ribbon la sopa kashela de kona mego de jawa hako gyores. Penyon chetse dang dene suyena topse la san lo tawa yena dene ngatso ke di kona mego de manzawa ke jitsen chere. Nyamlen shenda dezo de tata drup the wrong merung rawa get some na nenang de I say drup the wrong one rawa yores.
De la tene konso susu la mupa susu ta kalba susu mandawa yore la tene teacher na tambe chuge nyamlin na chopa se tambe chuge nyamlin mambo se mandawa se na de pento chibo yore tene teya perna sagante la chitang tujondo tene ndenda buti da palenda butangba sude la yanko ko tego dando kanya mete tene to ne higmare la higmare te ina sagante gna tene paleti ma to tunjumena tene ti sagante choya ba kaya yogo bare la mala yan fenki do kaya to mare teacher na saganti na sama mandawa namba na sopa yana te jai sa ni sa tene kanga tua chempo tene kanga sa mupa tua chipo ya po ndo ji yungra te yendala tene kanga lupo la ya tene zupo chi sarwa tene pento chempo tene yungra la pe te yendala ngaran su chu nyams lembe ka sa la te na namba na sopa nyams lo na kasa kani ya pento chempo
The reason is that individuals vary in their wishes, their aspirations, and their capacities. So therefore, overall, there is more benefit in presenting a wide variety of practices than there is in attempting to cause all practitioners to conform to one particular approach. It's a little bit like having a restaurant. A person could survive on just one type of food. A person could, Rinpoche said, just eat rice for the rest of their life, or bread, and they would fill their bellies. But if you opened a restaurant and you only served bread and one type of bread, no one would go there. So for the sake of the survival of your business, you have to serve a variety to appeal to people's tastes, and also it's more benefit. It's better for people if they don't just eat bread. Well, in the same way, in order to attract beings to Dharma, and in order to supply all of their spiritual needs, it's better if there are a variety of teachings.
Rinpoche, this is somewhat related. Together with Sukhavati, we hear a lot about the copper-colored mountain, and also, which is associated with Padmasambhava, and also the kingdom of Shambhala, celestial kingdom of Shambhala, associated with the Rigdons. And my understanding is that Mipam Rinpoche, for example, announced that he would be reborn in the kingdom of Shambhala before he died. So my question is, are both of those realms, do they fall in the category of the Dharmakaya or Sambhogakaya pure realms, or would they be in some other category?
Okay. That shinkam, chitanso shinkam ge kola, jensong ngatso ge the shinkam sum ge kesha mompo goju yores. Chiktina dewa chenji shinkam dang. Nusena zando pare pemoe ji shinkam dang. Sumpala Jongcho Shambhala Shingam, de sum de la Goju Mompiores. Dewachen Jishing de Tenten Shing Namprata Pachiris. The Chikshe Nide Zando Pare Dang Jang Shambhala Deni Tata Chukuham Lonko Ke Dakbishing Yanam Yana Truku Ke Shing Yanam Dakba Yanam Madakba Yanam Kandare. Dona Dakbishing Repe, Madakbishing Repe Dang. Pena Gonge Tata de Kenjen Mepamke ke longten yore korek de jang shambala la kochong yin ke longten nangwa dawa ke pache de chewa longken yopada yena data de penyon chechon dang dak mada ke ko tesono no
dewa jin ji shin kong te ta tanda ngaran su ben long no de song ya den ni ma nup choro na tang ni ji din mo bu paru na se ta te Papi Kingam Yapa, Tingaran's Tanda, Lutin Detail, let to Mepatapota. Tini Malam Jabna Mahumbala Jetapata, the Son Yorala, Tetar Re, Tini Shambalata, Sondo Parisingite, Chitanga, Tapata Madapa, Niganani, Tangarans in Jitin, Palpag, Jevigne, Tapate, Son Yorala. Tini Tia.
Deni Jiktin Papa ke Chevenere. Nika. Jiktin Papa ke Chevenere.
Chevenere, the Yinaya, Tachitank Jitin de la Ponjur Mambodogra. Ponjur Mambodogra la Tini Ponjur Mambondroa in Bicherna, Tatanda Perna, Meche Lojijag, Nena, America Leona, Satonte, you are. Kaya yo. Tene lo nija zong ngana le na ya je lo ba ga sa jan do je yo ji de ba. Tene tanda je le du te la pe panjur long je bo ndo bo je. Tene ya lo nija sun je je le na kan de na kai. Ta je njro ma bu ne ji sin ke de njro ma bu ndo ba. Pe te jan de la tene ne ji tin la yung njro ma bu ndo go yo re la. Ji senting ji pa ta tene lonlin ta kangala njro ma bu ndo go yo re ba. Te jan do tene sondo par ta shambala te tene sasakana yung go yo pa yin ma ho pa la tene tusi ka du yung go yo pa yin tene te tanda tente ngaran so hi to man do tene te tikap tana la takpa yakbo tene chui tarwa ta perna tanda sondu pajiro raboje yana tene pagodon kando mamambo yapa tene shambala yana tene makanga jeba zangboda tene kanga yabu yapa ta tene songyo raba teacher na tene tuse loja nija sonja kadu lewi yapa yen tene te kandizin mahumpala tarungu yapa yen tene tenso tene ngaranso hi matubando injiri henda songbo
Penar.
Tete suwa tatanda pesinani suwa yendala korante yung karavate.
Tata yanam maumbange yanam.
Maumbange yanam. Tatanda neji la pin ponjuru mambo suwa la tene perna kuma peg sajate choge sajayimba jansoge sajayimba. Tene tijini yang pakai la je satong dabo kontre dabo yang karje la main doa chapa yang karje la tambi chu yapo tarwa dabo ta tende neji lam ponjur dong do yorba
Ganz zaza zogo. Nga pe zaza zogo mata ngatsa nika gola legereta. Well, Sukhavati is a pure realm, which among other things means you can't get there physically. It's not on this planet. As it says in the aspiration for rebirth in Sukhavati, innumerable worlds distant from here to the direction of in the direction of the setting sun. That's how it begins, and so on. So you can't travel to Sukhavati physically. You can only be born there, and only under certain circumstances. Shambhala and the glorious copper-colored mountain are places on this planet. And anyone could be born there. The thing about realms within this planet, which basically means sites or countries in this planet, is that as we know well, circumstances change tremendously over time. For example, if you consider what we now call the United States of America, if you had been here somehow long enough ago, there would have been nobody here. And if you had been here after that, there would have been some people, the people we now call Native Americans. And if you're born here now, you have what we have now. And if you're born here 200 or 300 years from now, who knows? So, although it's taught that there are very good things about these two places, good things about Shambhala, good things about the glorious copper-colored mountain, the texts don't specify when they're talking about. Whether they are like that now, whether they were like that in the past, or whether they're going to be like that at some point in the future. For example, when they talk about Shambhala, they talk about an enlightened society in which everyone behaves in an exemplary fashion and everything is good. But we don't know if Shambhala is like that yet. We don't know if that's a prediction of something that's going to be true hundreds of years in the future. When they talk about the glorious copper-colored mountain, they talk about a place that is filled with Dakas and Dakinis. All the males are Dakas and all the females are Dakinis. But again, we don't know if that place is like that yet. It might be talking about the distant future. If you think about Tibet, we think of Tibet as being a certain way, but in fact, it's changed a great deal. If you go back far enough in time, Tibet was under the ocean. And then after it was no longer under the ocean, it was an empty desert, a wasteland. And then there were people. And then there was Dharma. And now there is what there is. So in that way, terrestrial realms are somewhat unstable.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, you had talked many times about the importance of dream practice and lucid dreaming and transforming dreams. And I was wondering if you could give us some form of a simplified visualization practice for us to do every night when we go to bed, and your blessing also in achieving the realization of it.
Data de milam ngosongwa dang, jangwa dang, chujur tangwa de zo ema ze galchenpo yin yangsi songmares. De yansang dene so ni kukpe kaso milam ngosongwa dang, jangwa dang, chujur tong topa ke mikpa le labo dang mikpa de gomdorongwa ke nangwa nangro nangse.
Tatiela tumo mahimbi mikpa yore. Yore de yinaya tati perna tanda nyamling susu tengni teni tatangbo nyamling cha songwarimba yintala sigu yore ba. Ta ngarangi tumo nga onda siti shudu tela tujondo tenhi paye ten. Nigi kapsalaya tenhi paye ten zabzabsi. Ten nimolaya ngarangi tumo mahimbi no ya. Ten semolaya tenhi paye teni zabni kale nyeko teni nye malam zon teni ti kap tana laya kap kala malam zon tupan rabo je jangna teni malam jangwa ta malam juro ten zo malam jangwa singe te ya ta chitang malam ka kapsala noa sharge yore te yina te kora tombe ronzu ma tu kaya yor marela te toni imbala hiba ngarangan chunho imbala hiba teni chunho imbala hiba te pe kalchewa imba te ta teni te chunho imbala yaboji hidu te la malam jordu judu de la tene kandi ina ngemba sambola jirwa chunchu chembola jirwa tene megewa de gewala ya jirwa la so ba siena tene tige ngarang nyami la ya pengi yorela tene partun chon la yo deta ko pengi yorela tene deta bo je nyamne siena kanga ya pore sambato la tene mixal ga mema tenzo tene ta jidang nyamne si samna susu ki nyamne si teja gom ja ta tene se jure ma to tene ta se ya te tamonto tomchu da bo ji na hiro chobe ban da bo ji la te ju si ti chen na ngaran su tu jun to ten hi boy ten ju tera kal che gre so.
As you indicated in your question, there exists particular techniques or visualizations which can be used in order to facilitate lucidity, training, and transformation of the dream state. These techniques or visualizations, however, are particular to the whatever particular system or cycle of practice they come from. And in all cases, they can only be done when the person has completed the entire system of practice up to the point at which they are taught. The fundamental thing that gives you the ability to master the dream state, however, is maintaining mindfulness and alertness throughout the day, throughout the waking state. And through the momentum of doing that, being able to maintain as much as possible mindfulness and alertness as you go to sleep. Through this, and through the intention to have lucid dreams, to train the dream state, and to transform the dream state, you gain the ability to do so. Lucid dreaming, of course, refers simply to recognizing that you are dreaming while you are dreaming. Training the dream state refers to, in the context of a lucid dream, being able to recognize the dream appearances as empty, as mere bewildered projections. And transformation of dreams means the subsequent ability founded in lucid dreaming and the recognition of the emptiness of dream appearances, the subsequent ability to change the content of dreams, to change bad dreams into good dreams, to alter things, to change their size or nature or appearance, to transform unvirtuous situations into virtuous ones, and so on. Now, if someone wishes to, in addition to the basic practice of mindfulness and alertness, which Rinpoche said is the most important thing, the most important factor here, if someone, in addition to that, wishes to employ specific techniques to facilitate lucidity, training, and transformation of dreams, then you need to undertake the complete practice from start to finish of the particular system from which those particular instructions come. And it is forbidden to teach these in a public setting.
Thank you. And Rinpoche, when I was discussing not eating a lot of bread and rice in your diet, the menu, there's a lot of other things on the menu, just to let you know that.
Tata Rinpoche ke dine balat dang shadre de nikashe melopa korang shu tsaware de insan dine de dawa ke zakan la tsane mape.
Rinpoche, while you're in the Bardo state, you encounter other beings in the Bardo state. And if you have enough stability, is it possible to help those beings? And if so, how?
Tata Bardo semchen detso ke pensun tongi yorese. De insan dine rang te tsam sempa tempo rawayana Bardo semchen shenda la ropo soya yorepe dang.
Zotuguraya.
Dine kanra zotugure.
Bardo tachirang pando chongi yore chulmando dine noaya puchi.
Ore.
Dine sinil robasito gure.
Yeah, you can. You can do it by telling them, first of all, you're in the Bardo. Try not to become too bewildered and allow your mind to come to rest and things like that.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Tujie Rinpoche, and Tujie for all your teachings and all your blessings. I'm trying to deepen my understanding of karma. And my understanding is that grasping, clinging to a self, is what holds karma together, cause and effect. You mentioned the quieting of the karmic winds at the time of death, and you spoke of the result, possible results of that, but I'm trying to understand what the causes of that loosening of karma at the time of death might be.
That the chedonso the leju devoke kolare pena sengama dan chimake drelsundo. Chedonso ngatso ke le de jude ke zonya kam jude ke mutuya de dagzines. Dagzin yopala tane de jude lo ame bayore segido. De setsane de segido. Dene de dampo morang de ses. Dene chedonso data lechi junde de dang lechi lungla dralwa khanda yore dang se chegi jokde lechi lung konzo ma shiwada de ma shina yo se pena de se tamade de lechi lung de so shigi yore se lechi lung de so shiwa am timpe kapso yenang le junma cheba yore se dana de le junma cheba yana leche long de so shiwam tempe ke jukare.
Leche long singite tanda ngaran tsuge ta talapun tu long diore.
Ah, tala ore.
Talapuya long diore.
Ore.
Tende na bo mainta. Ta che chitang leche long singite yongul ge rete la long komda bo jela. Sungi yore. Te sungi yore la tini tige leche long tige njurwa la tini tini penna ngaranda bo che yena tangpo leche long tini pogu chung chung che tini leche long ge rimbe yendo lo zonde tini mechembo che tini leche long ge zonde magengo che ta tini leche long soso la tini zoni ta tini zogi yore te zodu te la tene leche long te la leche long mambu yungurwa ta ngaran su mei luti ne chewe leche long te nupati se dorwa ten ko tana la zo no yora la ya leche long yendo ongurwa kora padolam do leche long te jewa chamalem leche long da te leche te yongurta jewa je inchi minchi ta leche long te ta koran tombo le kare so yona ti leche long te undu te la milu le milu tin ta zo te leche long nipa te se te milu ti chasa zo ta ya jewa chima la te le kare so yo be leche long tin te te yung kura
to na leche long te no ba gak dog marwa
chasa go
gak ma
ta koran ti le se ke te koran do do te ma imba le mambo yo ra ti nipa te se do ra le rimba yendo zo do di perna tanda le la pensi je le da zozi je le sinkin da bota tinde song yo la tini te la pensi gewe pong zozi me gewe zoba pensi me gewe pong zozi gewe zoba pensi gewe pong zozi ya gewe zoba pensi ya me gewe pong zozi ya me gewe zoba da bota tinde nomba na zoba tinde song yo la tini perna pensi tini gewe pong zozi me gewe zoba te perna meche tini che tambo gewe pong te lutin yapo che milu rabo che to jorba tang tempan rabo chong na yang tini takwa nandu mu rabo na takwa chengen ba te depan rabo tinte yungi wara la ten rabo che yena pensi gewe pong zozi me gewe zoba rabo ta yang pe na tundro ndabo ji yin na yang tundro la penji me gewe mpomba re zoji gewe zopa kora pe seka la jibo tene sege pomba mepa kanga desa jibo yoba zubo debo yoba ndabo tende yungu yowara la te penji me gewe mpomba zoji gewe zopa te pe na me kaki tene pe jibo luten tangbo zangbo naza mepa parche mepa ta tende yungu yowara la chuen dropa tenzo yin na penji gewe mpomba zoji gewe zopa ta ti penji to zoji tenzo rinpa yin tena kakala tene zo nukyo araba penna meji yin na ya ta tanda pe michi ki te la ya pe nasa mangbo yunkin te zi zoji migiwi zopan rabo ji yin na ya michi mi la ya koi pe jibu tene nasa meba zubo debo tene le je long te koran koran jorro karaba te.
First of all, karmic wind is not a physical thing. It is not like physical wind which blows dust or leaves around. What's meant by karmic wind is movement and therefore change. So as long as there is a process of change, that change constitutes what we call karmic wind. For example, the transformation of a human being throughout their life as they mature from a child to an adolescent to an adult is a process of what we call karmic wind. So when at the end of your life the karmic wind associated with that life is used up, this is not the exhaustion of all karmic winds. It is the exhaustion of one stream of karmic wind among many that are active in a person's continuum. For example, the karmic wind of entering the bardo is becoming active for that person. One thing you need to remember is that karmic wind, the process of karmic momentum, is not unitary. A large number of streams of imprints of actions are functioning at any one time. So at any one time, some of these are being used up, and new ones are starting, and other ones are continuing, and so on. So the pacification or cessation of some karmic winds does not mean the exhaustion of all karmic winds. In broad terms, there are two types of karma that cause a certain life. These are called casting karma or propelling karma and completing karma. You could have good casting karma and good completing karma. You could have bad casting karma and bad completing karma. You could have good casting karma and bad completing karma, or you could have bad casting karma and good completing karma. So, for example, a case of good casting karma and bad completing karma is where someone is born as a human being under good circumstances, but thereafter is always sick or always afflicted by mishap. An example of bad casting karma and good completing karma is you're born as an animal, but thereafter you spend your whole life happily living in great comfort with adequate food and shelter, and you're never sick. An example of good casting karma and good completing karma is you're born human, and throughout your whole life you have good health, you're happy, you practice Dharma, and so on. And then there's the other possibility as well. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, because, for example, even within the completing karma, there can be a change during the life. For example, a person could be born as a human being, and for the first part of their life undergo all manner of mishaps or sickness or deprivation, and then their whole life could change, and they could spend the second half of their life in great happiness. So we're out of time. So could those of you who are still in line be the first to ask questions this afternoon?
Teni tanda ngarang jitang ta tanda yang kama pa kudung chete yana yudu te ngarang so kanga nyamdo jal sama pa jong sonte yana ya teni tanda motra pa kin se sama pa tende kangali yung dogla teni ngarang jima kale jalge yana te terin no banjar denki yana jar tu petni ngarang ke samna endi ke tahi jepate teni tambo sarje nyamdende sabato ji chungare yana ya cheting kende na petni chenam be ke samna tahi jepate chitang silaje de tenjur che yo mare da chang pare te madewa da yore te yana ya tenda na te sawa london roa pento chewa te ngarang ngone kahi loma kahi kanto ta kale yung kundu se de dandan kure sla du kahi le pento pa ngone ale lo chong song na ten te je phune ta che nam ba ya che te la phet na sra te song na ya pu yo re se hyuin.
I had planned to go to visit the stupa of His Holiness the Dawang Kamapa here this afternoon, and my intention was that we would all go together. Subsequently, I was informed that there is a parking issue connected with this, and I was discouraged from doing this. So, to compromise, what I would suggest is that any or all of those of you who wish to visit and see the stupa go this afternoon, and I'll go later on my own. My original intention was that when we all went together, we would all recite the words of auspiciousness together. And so, having modified that intention, I would still encourage those of you who go there as a group today to see the stupa and visit it and circumambulate it, to recite the words of auspiciousness together when you do so. The words of auspiciousness is a liturgy, a short liturgy that is renowned for its benefit, its immediate benefit in the transformation of circumstances and the generation of auspiciousness of all kinds. Now, I have a copy of this liturgy to distribute. It is only the transliteration. It is without the translation. But even if you use this, I have observed that people who make use of it are able to quickly transform circumstances for the better. When people have come to me with difficult circumstances, I've often recommended that they begin to use this liturgy, and they and I have observed a remarkable benefit from its use, so I would encourage you to chant it when you visit the stupa.
Yeah.
Thank you.